It's late at night, and the temperature outside is dropping faster than you expected. The house is quiet. The furnace turns on, then shuts off. Somewhere behind the walls, water is sitting inside a network of pipes you normally never think about. But tonight, you can't stop thinking about them. You check the weather app again. 17 degrees, then 12. By morning, the forecast says it could be even colder. And suddenly, your mind creates the entire disaster before anything has actually happened. A frozen pipe, a crack hidden inside the wall, water spreading across the floor, a plumber who can't come until the next day, a repair bill you weren't prepared for. Nothing is leaking, nothing has broken, but your body is already reacting as if the damage has begun. So you walk outside or into the basement with a flashlight, a piece of inexpensive insulating material, and a few basic supplies. You wrap the most exposed section of pipe, secure it, look at your work, and go back inside. Maybe it cost $5, maybe it took 10 minutes, and maybe it's something the internet would dramatically call an old Amish trick, even though the label tells you more about our fascination with simple, off-grid solutions than it does about any specific community. But something changes almost immediately. The temperature is still falling. The pipe hasn't been tested by the cold yet. You have no proof that your small intervention will be enough. And still, you feel calmer. That may be the most interesting part of the entire story, because perhaps the first thing protected by that $5 solution wasn't the pipe. Perhaps it was your mind. We usually assume people are drawn to cheap household tricks because they want to save money. And sometimes that is exactly the reason. A low-cost solution is attractive because professional systems can be expensive, electricity can fail, and emergency repairs can become financially painful. But money alone doesn't explain the emotional power of these methods. A simple solution does something a sophisticated system doesn't always do. It lets you see your own response. You can touch it, install it, adjust it, stand back and say, I did something. And when an invisible threat is making you feel powerless, doing something concrete can feel more valuable than the object itself. The human mind has a difficult relationship with problems that haven't happened yet. A problem happening right now demands action. You see the water. You find the shut-off valve. You call for help. The situation may be stressful, but it has a clear shape. A future threat is different. It has no beginning and no ending. It exists as a possibility, which means your mind can keep rehearsing it indefinitely. What if the temperature drops lower than predicted? What if that pipe is more exposed than you thought? What if the power goes out? What if you wake up too late? What if one small mistake becomes a major expense? The brain often treats uncertainty like an unfinished task. It continues returning to the same question because it hasn't found a clear point of resolution. That is why you check the weather again, even though you checked it 10 minutes ago. The forecast didn't change enough to justify another look. But you weren't only looking for information, you were looking for closure. You wanted the app to tell you that everything would be fine. It couldn't. So your mind kept searching for another way to reduce the tension. This is where a small physical action becomes psychologically powerful. When you wrap an exposed pipe, seal a drafty window, place a flashlight beside the bed, or prepare the house before a storm, you transform a vague fear into a visible response. You still don't control the weather, but you control one part of your relationship with it. Psychologists sometimes describe this through the idea of locus of control. The degree to which you experience your life as something you can influence, rather than something that simply happens to you. That doesn't mean believing you control everything. It means recognizing where your actions matter. The cold is external. The forecast is external. The power grid, the timing of a repair technician, and the condition of every hidden pipe may be partly outside your control. But choosing to inspect a vulnerable area is within your control. Preparing basic supplies is within your control. Taking a reasonable preventive step is within your control. The moment you act, the threat stops being completely external. You now have a role in the outcome, and that shift can reduce anxiety even before you know whether your solution worked. It also reduces what we might call mental load. Before taking action, your mind is holding several unresolved possibilities at once. You're imagining damage, cost, inconvenience, blame, and regret. Each scenario competes for attention. After taking a concrete step, the mind can compress some of that uncertainty into a simpler message. I noticed the risk, and I responded. That sentence doesn't guarantee safety, but it restores agency. And agency is one of the strongest psychological differences between fear that mobilizes you and fear that paralyzes you. Think about a child facing a difficult task. If the task feels too large and the child believes nothing they do will make a difference, frustration appears quickly. They may avoid the problem, ask someone else to take over, or decide they are simply bad at it. But if the task can be divided into one manageable action, the experience changes. Hold this piece. Try this step. Move this part. Now look at what happened. The child doesn't need complete mastery. They need evidence that their effort can produce a result. Adults aren't so different. When you solve a small household problem with your own hands, the practical result may be modest. But your brain records something larger. You encountered a problem, you stayed with it, you tried a response. Something changed. That sequence builds self-efficacy, which is simply the belief that you can take effective action when a challenge appears. Self-efficacy doesn't come mainly from repeating positive phrases to yourself. It grows through experiences of doing. You fix a loose cabinet hinge. You stop a small draft. You find the correct breaker. You prepare the car before a freeze. You learn where the main water shutoff is. Each action becomes a small piece of evidence. Not evidence that you will always know what to do, but evidence that you are capable of learning, responding, and asking better questions. Over time, those experiences can become part of your identity. You stop seeing yourself as someone who immediately becomes helpless when something goes wrong. You begin seeing yourself as someone who can investigate, someone who can prepare, someone who can remain useful under pressure. This may explain why older, low-tech solutions often feel more satisfying than pressing a button on an expensive device. The device may be more advanced, it may even be more effective, but when the entire process is hidden inside the machine, you don't always feel connected to the solution. You purchased protection. You didn't necessarily experience yourself creating it. A simple method makes cause and effect visible. There is the vulnerable pipe. There is the protective material. There are your hands placing one around the other. The simplicity gives the mind a story it can understand. This was exposed. Now it is less exposed. This was ignored. Now it has been addressed. That kind of clarity is deeply reassuring in a world filled with systems most of us don't fully understand. Your phone works, but you may not know how to repair it. Your heating system works, but you may not understand every component. Your electricity arrives through a grid you cannot personally control. Your water comes through infrastructure hidden underground and behind walls. Modern life gives us incredible comfort, but it also creates a strange kind of dependence. We are surrounded by things we rely on and cannot fix. So, when you find one small problem you can understand and respond to without a subscription, an app, or an electrical outlet, the experience feels almost symbolic. You haven't just protected an object. You've temporarily escaped the feeling that every important part of your life depends on a system beyond your reach. For some people, this kind of self-reliance comes from calm experience. They grew up watching someone prepare before winter. They learned that weather follows patterns, resources should be protected, and small maintenance prevents larger problems. They don't wait until fear becomes overwhelming. They act early because preparation is normal. They understand that a simple solution doesn't have to be perfect to be useful. It only needs to be proportional to the risk. They inspect the pipe. They add protection. They check their work once. Then they go back inside and continue their evening. Their preparation creates freedom. Because they have done what reasonably can be done, they no longer need to give the threat all of their attention. This is self-sufficiency rooted in confidence. It says, "I don't control the winter, but I know how to respond to it." There is humility in that attitude. The person is not pretending to be invulnerable. They are simply refusing to be passive. But the exact same behavior can come from a very different place. Another person may also inspect the pipes, add insulation, and prepare the house. From the outside, the two people look identical. Inside, they may be having completely different experiences. The second person finishes wrapping the pipe, then touches it again. They check whether the material is tight enough. They search for another video. They compare their work to 3 different examples. They wonder whether they used the wrong product. They inspect another pipe that wasn't originally a concern. They check the forecast again. For a few minutes, they feel relief. Then the mind produces another possibility. What about the pipe in the crawl space? What if the garage gets colder? What if the insulation gets wet? What if the solution creates a different problem? The preparation never reaches a true ending. Each action reduces anxiety temporarily, but the relief doesn't last. And because acting produced a brief sense of safety, the brain learns to demand more action whenever uncertainty returns. This is how reasonable preparation can slowly become hypervigilance. Hypervigilance is not simply paying attention. It is the feeling that you must keep paying attention because relaxing could be dangerous. The person may believe they are being responsible, but responsibility has become fused with constant monitoring. Rest begins to feel like negligence. Trust begins to feel like risk. Depending on another person begins to feel like surrender. And a small household problem becomes connected to a much older rule. If I don't stay on top of everything, something will go wrong. That rule can develop for many reasons. Perhaps someone grew up in an unpredictable environment where problems were ignored until they became emergencies. Perhaps adults made promises but didn't follow through. Perhaps asking for help led to disappointment, criticism, or embarrassment. Perhaps the person learned early that being useful was the safest way to avoid becoming a burden. Or perhaps they simply experienced enough preventable failures that constant preparation began to feel like common sense. No single origin explains everyone, and not every person who prefers to do things alone is carrying hidden trauma. Sometimes people enjoy practical independence because they are curious, skilled, and genuinely energized by solving problems. But sometimes self-sufficiency is less about freedom and more about avoiding vulnerability. That distinction matters, because independence can become an identity that protects you and traps you at the same time. At first, being the capable one feels empowering. You are the person who knows what to do. You carry the tools. You remember the supplies. You check the forecast. You notice the weak point before anyone else does. People rely on you. And because they rely on you, your usefulness begins to feel like proof of your value. But then something subtle happens. You no longer solve problems only because they need solving. You solve them because not solving them threatens the person you believe you must be. If you need help, who are you? If someone else knows more, are you still useful? If you stop checking, are you irresponsible? If something goes wrong despite your preparation, does it mean you failed? The pipe is no longer just a pipe. It becomes a test of competence, a test of foresight, a test of whether you deserve to relax. And no $5 solution can permanently satisfy a fear that deep. This is why the most revealing moment often comes after the action is complete. Not while you are preparing. Afterward. You have done what you reasonably can. Now, what happens inside you? Can you accept that some uncertainty remains? Can you return to your dinner, your family, your book, or your sleep? Can you say, "This reduces the risk, and that is enough for tonight"? Or does your mind immediately search for the next thing that might fail? That is the real psychological test. Healthy preparation has an ending. Defensive control does not. Healthy preparation says, "I have improved the situation." Defensive control says, "I am only safe if I eliminate every possible threat." One produces a sense of readiness, the other produces an endless list, and because life can never offer zero risk, the second strategy eventually turns responsibility into exhaustion. You may know this feeling outside the home. You send an important email, then reread it 5 times. You prepare for a meeting, then keep adding notes long after you understand the subject. You check that the door is locked, but the memory doesn't feel convincing, so you check again. You plan the trip, confirm the reservation, save the confirmation, take a screenshot, and still imagine arriving to discover that something has gone wrong. In each case, preparation is reasonable. The question is whether preparation helps you re-enter your life or prevents you from doing so. Does the action create space, or does it become another demand? This doesn't mean you should ignore real danger or dismiss practical concerns as just anxiety. Frozen pipes can cause serious damage. Severe cold can overwhelm simple measures. Some situations require better materials, professional knowledge, or a response appropriate to the specific home and conditions. Psychological insight should never replace practical judgment. But practical judgment also includes knowing where your control ends. You can reduce a risk without pretending to erase it. You can prepare without guaranteeing the future. You can take responsibility without assigning yourself responsibility for every possible outcome. That is a more mature form of control. Not total control, accurate control. You identify what belongs to you, you act on it, then you release what does not. That release can be harder than the work itself. Wrapping a pipe takes minutes. Accepting uncertainty may take much longer, because uncertainty confronts you with a truth. Self-reliance sometimes tries to hide. Even capable people remain vulnerable. You can make the right decision and still face a problem. You can prepare carefully and still need help. You can understand a system and still encounter something you didn't predict. You can be responsible without being all-powerful. For someone whose identity is built around preventing failure, that truth can feel threatening. But it can also be liberating, because the deepest form of confidence is not the belief that nothing will go wrong. It is the belief that if something does go wrong, you will still be able to respond. Maybe you'll solve it yourself. Maybe you'll call someone with more experience. Maybe you'll discover that the damage is smaller than you imagined. Maybe you'll be frustrated, spend money, change your plan, and learn something you didn't want to learn. But you will remain yourself. One failure will not erase your competence. One surprise will not prove you were careless. One moment of dependence will not make you weak. This changes the meaning of self-sufficiency. Independence no longer means never needing anyone. It means not collapsing when you discover your limits. It means knowing enough to act, enough to pause, and enough to recognize when a problem requires help. It means using skill without turning skill into armor. It means preparing for reality without trying to force reality into complete obedience. So, return to that cold night. The forecast is still severe. The house still makes unfamiliar sounds. You still know that the inexpensive material around the pipe is not a magical shield. It cannot negotiate with the weather. It cannot promise that every hidden section of plumbing will remain protected. But perhaps that was never the real promise. The promise was smaller and more honest. You saw a vulnerability and you responded. You turned attention into action. You replaced helpless observation with a proportionate step. And then, ideally, you allowed the step to be complete. That is what the $5 solution may truly protect. Not only the pipe, not only your wallet. It protects the part of you that needs evidence that uncertainty does not make you powerless. But it also reveals something. Do you prepare because you trust your ability to respond? Or do you prepare because you cannot tolerate the possibility of needing a response later? Do you enjoy being self-reliant? Or did you learn that relying on anyone else was unsafe? Are you solving the problem in front of you? Or are you trying to prevent an old fear from ever being confirmed again? You don't need to answer those questions immediately. Just notice what happens the next time you finish preparing for something. Notice whether your body softens. Notice whether your attention returns to the present. Notice whether you can say, "I've done enough." That small pause may tell you more than the action itself, because preparation should make life more livable. It should give you enough confidence to stop watching the threat. It should help you sleep, not create a new reason to stay awake. The real value of a simple solution is not that it gives you absolute control over winter, it is that it reminds you there is often something you can do when the world feels unpredictable. And the real sign of confidence is not continuing until every risk disappears. It is knowing when your part is finished. If this made you think about the way you prepare, control, or try to handle everything alone, share your experience in the comments and subscribe for more videos about the hidden psychology behind ordinary behavior. Fim de narrativa.